Everyone thinks Charlie Carrel's a genius, but if you've been copying his style, that might be a huge mistake. I watched 3 full sessions from his old 2-5 bankroll challenge, over 20 hands, and broke down nearly every one. He's reviewed almost every big name in poker: Rampage, Mariano, Brad Owen, Keating, even me, where he ranked me S tier, second only to the precocious boy himself, Garrett Adelstein. Today, we flip the script. Let's find out if Charlie belongs in that tier himself, or if he's just really good at sounding right. Let's jump into the first hand.
Fold.
5's on the button. There's a straddle ahead of us, so there's 3 players behind. We make it 20 off a 500-pound stack. The small blinds is a player that at the table, there's probably only one other very good, competent professional that we're playing against, other than ourselves, of course. Now, he 3-bets out the small blind. He's on our direct left for the whole night. He 3-bets out the small blind to 100 pounds. The 100 size is pretty interesting. I had a feeling that if he picked up something like aces, kings, queens, he would have chosen a smaller sizing. 5x out of position is standard, but not when you're playing only 50 straddles deep. So I thought that this size was very ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack heavy, some bluffs, your ace, deuce suited, king, 9 suited. So given all of that information, given that I thought he was going to be going after us, especially on the first hand, I decided to shove it in his face.
All in. All in.
What is it?
Yeah, 500.
So we get the very...
So the $10 straddle is on, and Charlie min opens here on the button to $20. We get a 5x 3-bet from the small blind here. And Charlie deduces that this guy's just unbalanced here and that he would choose a smaller size maybe if he had top of range like aces and kings when they're essentially playing 50 big blinds deep. So Charlie decides the small blind's range is mostly going to be hands like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, maybe some bluffs like ace deuce suited, king 9 suited, and then some pocket pairs like eights through jacks, something like that. So Charlie, theorizing this guy doesn't have the top of his range, just decides to rip it in here. I think this is actually pretty good. The only small thing I'll quibble with here is Charlie saying this guy's just committed. He's not gonna like it, but he's never gonna fold hands like 8s, 9s, 10s. If this guy's never folding 8s, 9s, 10s, he's definitely not folding hands like ace queen, probably not folding ace jack suited. But Charlie's also getting some hands like king 9 suited to fold, king queen suited, queen jack suited, a bunch of stuff like that. And then stuff that has like decent equity against us as well, hands like ace deuce suited. So overall, I think Charlie picking up this read here, definitely not a standard spot, just picking up the $115 in dead money. Pretty nice here. I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 5. Definitely creative. I think this is a really solid play.
6x on the button, and we're looking down in the big blind at jack 9 offsuit. Now, I think this might just be his standard opening size. I've seen him do it once more, and this is by far way a fold in a normal online cash game if somebody happened to 6x it. Not that they would, but given that we have good live reads on this player and we have a general theoretical edge, I decided I could just about justify a call. I'd probably be folding jack 7, probably be folding jack 8 as well, but jack 9 I think I can just about squidge in there as a defend.
So we're 650 effective. A villain opens on the button and Charlie decides to defend in the big blind to a 6x open with jack 9 offsuit. Look, I don't care if this guy's drooling out the side of his mouth. We're 130 big blinds deep and this guy opened to 6x on the button. Even if we have a massive edge, and I have no doubt Charlie has a massive edge on anybody playing 2-5, I still just don't see how this is going to be a profitable defend when we only start off 130 big blinds. Now, if we started off 200, 250, 300 big blinds, okay, I can get behind this. If the guy opened the 3x, okay, I can get behind this. But at 6x open, the more shallow we are, the less our edge is gonna be. So I would just fold this.
The flop comes ace 10 8, 2 diamonds, and the opponent very quickly checks back. And we're feeling pretty good that we can win this hand at some point now. When he checks back, he's very unlikely to have an ace. He's played quite a few hands face up to this point, and even though he can be aggressive, he's not so trappy from what I've seen. Now the turn is a 7 of diamonds. Let's go. Let's go. I think when there's 3 diamonds out there, it's a very clear bet. We need to be thinking what we can get calls by. There's a lot of pair and straight draw hands. You know, if he's sitting there with something like jack 10, 10 9, 8 9, pocket 9s. There's a lot of pair and 1 diamond hands. You know, if he has something like king 10 with a king of diamonds, pocket kings with a king of diamonds. So there's a lot of hands that will call very large bets. We have our image and it's time to go for some decent value. So with 65 in the pot, I decide to go for a pretty healthy healthy 75. I was trying to think what would 10-9 call, what would pocket kings with the diamond call, and I thought 75 was a pretty sensible answer.
All right, so flop checks through here, and Charlie decides to go 75 on the turn in overbet, just deducing that this guy has a lot of pair plus straight draw or pair plus diamond draw. I think the range analysis is spot on. I think the decision to go with a big bet is also spot on. I have two small quibbles here. Number one, I didn't hear Charlie mention any ace X in this guy's range. Even if the guy's not a trapper, on these ace high boards, even if they're wet, this is the one situation where guys will kind of check back to pot control. I would put some, say, ace 5 suited, ace 4 suited, ace 6, some of that stuff in this guy's range, possibly. Even if he's just rarely gonna have two pair or a set here, I would also include that in the range. My second minor quibble here is all of these hands Charlie named, the 10-9, the king 10 with a diamond, the pocket kings with a diamond. Yeah, all of this stuff is going to call a big bet. I think it's gonna call a much bigger bet than 75. I would probably just go 100 here. I can't think of many hands that would call 75 but fold to 100. So I like Charlie's thought process, just maybe choosing a little bit bigger size on this turn, getting a little bit more greedy.
We get a quick call here, and it's worth noting that at this speed, we just always have the best hand. If he had somehow checked back a flush draw on the flop, he would have at least considered raising, I believe, against this size. So I think that we can safely say we have the best hand almost 100% of the time. So the river card is a complete blank, and we have another decision. How big do we go for value? So I was kind of torn in this spot. You know, on one hand, he has a very weak range, almost always going to be a one pair holding unless he turned to two pair. On the other hand, we have our image, and I really like going big for value when I am me in this spot. And I decided that the latter reason outweighed the former. I go for a hefty overbet again, 250 pounds, which is a huge portion of our stack at this point, and we get the absolute snap call.
So Charlie decides to go for a small overbet on this river, and what I always like to think in this spot is, what would I do with the inverse if I got to this spot with a bricked draw like queen jack or something like that? What size would I go on this river to try to get pocket kings, king 10, 10-9, all of that stuff to fold here? I'd probably go something like 325, 350, somewhere in that vicinity. I feel like that gets the job done almost all the time. So going a little bit smaller than that, 250 here. I think perfect value size chosen by Charlie. So overall, I'd give this hand maybe a 3 out of 5. I think the pre-flop call is a little bit egregious at the stack depth, even with a massive skill edge. And I think the turn size could have been a little bit bigger, squeaking out a little bit more value. But overall, thought post-flop, Charlie played this really well.
So there's a straddle to 10, and a professional poker player limps for 10 pounds as an over limp on the button, and we look down in the small blind with pocket jacks. Now we need to decide on sizing. I don't want to go too small because it is pretty loose table. Don't want to go too big because our hand's so strong. I don't want them to be folding any of their, say, like 7-8 suiteds. So I go for a kind of medium size, 55 pounds. Seems about right. So the flop comes jack 7 deuce, 2 clubs. Let's go. Running like Jesus. We have a decision here. The button is actually on around 300 pounds. In these kind of situations, I love to check. I think it looks like we can be giving up with loads of ace kings. It looks like we can have a lot of check folds in our range. And if the first limper bets, that's great. And if he checks, it's actually such a good spot for the button to be betting himself. So it's a perfect spot to be trapping with such a small SPR against the button. And that is exactly what happens. We get a check from the first limper and the button goes all in. I probably should theoretically tank for about 3 minutes repping the old ace high, but I just don't have it in me to slow roll somebody like that, and I very quickly call it off after getting an account. We show our hand very quickly. The opponent doesn't show. The turn is the ace of clubs, not looking too pretty. The river, the deuce of clubs. I actually didn't see that we had a boat at first, so I wasn't too happy, but when the opponent mucked his cards, I was very happy to see that.
All right, so the $10 straddle on, again, someone limps and a pro over limps here on the button. We're gonna put pro in quotation marks here because number one, they're playing 2-5, and number two, they started off this hand. What are they playing? 65, 70 big blinds? How can this be a pro, Charlie? Is this really a pro? All right, so Charlie decides to make it 55 here in the small blind. I'm on board. He doesn't want to get folds here. I think this is okay. Maybe could squeeze out a little bit more, maybe go 60 or 70, but I think this is good. Now both limpers are going to call. We go to a flop, which is jack 7 deuce, and Charlie going choosing to check here. I love this. You guys know I love this. I'm a big fan of checking my range, especially on boards where I think it's going to be overstabbed, when there are multiple players behind us. Really on board with Charlie's thought process here that this is just going to look a lot like ace king giving up at a shallow SPR here. So he checks. The button is just going to put the money in. Charlie obviously calls it off, and he is going to win with a full house here. Overall, gonna give this hand another 5 out of 5. Think he played this pretty much perfectly. Could maybe quibble with the pre-flop sizing just a little, but think it's okay because the button started so shallow and don't want him making any hero folds with a weak range when he over limps.
I'd add in this hand, it's not a huge hand, but it gives a little bit of an illustration about what kind of image we have and why our stack, as you'll see, goes up and up without us really winning too many big pots. We open king queen offsuit under the gun. We get a call from the button and a call from the big blind. Flop comes jack 7-5, 2 hearts, checks around. I didn't think we could really see bet here. I think that we would just get called by all pocket pairs, pretty much anything above, you know, 6s and above. We get called by all 7x, gut shots, everything. So I didn't think we had any fold equity, or at least not enough. But when the turn comes to 10, we now have an open ender and 2 overs. And when the big blind checks again, he plays pretty face up from what I've seen so far. I don't think he's ever checking something like 8-9 here. When the person in position hasn't bet himself, I think we have 2 pretty capped ranges and we can go for a very decent overbet here. We bet 110 into £50 and get 2 quick folds.
All right, so this one Charlie opens with king queen and gets called in a couple of spots. Decides to check here on the flop with 1 player in position, 1 player out of position. Really like this. This just not going to get through. And if the button checks back here and the big blind checks on the turn, we're just going to have carte blanche to empty the clip, because on these wet dynamic boards, the villain on the button just doesn't protect his check back range. So when he does check back, the best hand he's ever going to have here is a hand like 7x or pocket 8s or something like that. So when the button does check back and the big blind now checks on the turn, we can just empty the clip here. We know we're going to be getting a lot of folds here. Charlie goes 110 and both players fold. Maybe a tiny quibble, maybe against 2 extremely capped ranges. I may go a little smaller here, something like 80 or 90. Like, I don't mind getting called by a hand like 7-8 or 10-8 or something like that here on this turn. I would love for those hands to call, just knowing that we're never running into a brick wall here. The big blind is capped, the button is capped, and if we can get those hands to call on the turn, we're just going to be able to get them to fold 90+% of the time on almost any river run out. So overall, gonna give this a 4 out of 5.
And here, blind versus blind, a recreational player checks his option as we're playing 5-5. We raised it up to 20, trying to get some fold equity with our 8-6 of clubs, and he makes the call. Jack 7 deuce, 2 hearts. He checks it over to us. We make a very small continuation bet, trying to fold him off some king highs and ace highs, things like this, and we make it 15. He now decides to raise to 75, and of course we have absolute air, so we make the no, I'm reaching for chips, and we've clicked it. In fact, we've literally clicked it to £135. Now, my thought process here was that he had lost all of the small pots against us and he can't really have anything. I thought he would have raised jacks and 7s pre-flop, so he's really only repping pocket deuces and potentially jack 7 suited.
All right, we're gonna have to talk about this. So a player limps in the small blind here, he completes, and Charlie raises to 20. Like, I'm on board with raising here. I would just say, like, when a recreational player limps in the small blind, they're just gonna be massively unbalanced here. They're just going to be open raising their strong hands. Like, a strong player from the small blind may just be playing a limp their entire range strategy. I don't know what the rake setup is in this game, but if it's a time game, a strong player may just be playing a limp their entire range strategy from the small blind here, and then having some limp raises, some limp calls, and limp folds. A fish or a recreational player just not going to be balanced here. So when they limp, they're just going to have kind of the middle bottom of their range that just kind of wants to see a cheap flop. They're not going to have that top part of their range. I would just go bigger here if I was Charlie. I may go like 30 or 35, just knowing that this guy just doesn't have really any strong hands, and we can just open to a much bigger size. And then on the flop here, Charlie decides to c-bet small on a wet dynamic board. I'm on board with. This guy goes for a check raise, and Charlie deducing that he's not going to have hands like 7s, not going to have a hand like jack 7 or jack deuce suited. Those would just fold pre-flop. 7s or jacks would just open. So pretty much the only strong hand that this guy can have here, maybe a hand like pocket deuces. Charlie decides to bet 3-bet. I don't know if I'm necessarily on board with. I think a lot of times when recreational players check raise the flop, they get really honest on turns and rivers. So if we are gonna make a move here, maybe just calling in position, seeing what this guy does on the turn. And if this guy chooses a small bet on a blank turn, well, we just know he's got a jack a lot of the time. And calling on the flop and raising on the turn, one, is going to look super strong. And number two, we're gonna have a lot more information about this guy's range. If he has pocket deuces, he's just gonna keep firing huge on most turns unless the turn brings in a flush. And if the turn brings in a flush, well, we're deep enough also to empty the clip here. So I think just calling in position would be my preferred play. Charlie goes with the bet 3-bet though, and we are going to go to a turn.
The turn is the offsuit deuce. And lo and behold, to my surprise, he bets £225. I don't know what the hell he's repping. Is he repping ace jack? Is he repping a bluff? Is he repping a deuce? I don't know what's going on. I'm repping very strong here. So there's a little part of me that doesn't believe him.
All right, we're gonna go off the rails a little bit more because now this guy's gonna donk lead on the turn. What is this when this guy donk leads on the turn? Actually a pretty good card for Charlie because it just makes it very unlikely that this guy has a strong hand like pocket deuces now. The donk lead is a little bit concerning because this guy check raised the flop and now led the turn. So like he obviously just has a hand he likes. So he either has some type of heart draw or he's got jack X. So I think Charlie floating on this turn, not sure it's great because we don't really have a get out of jail free card. What's gonna happen here if the river is a blank and this guy checks? Sure, we just get to bluff and win against his bricked heart draws, but the problem is the jack X is never gonna fold. Recreational players tend to check call on the river. So what's gonna happen on like an offsuit 4 is this guy's gonna check, and I would hope on like a blank card that Charlie just goes like really small to try to get a hand like a bricked flush draw to fold. If the river is a flush draw and this guy gets there with his flush, obviously he's just going to bet. If he checks, we know he's got a jack, so then we can bluff on the river. So I guess calling here, we do have some options. Recreational players are gonna play face up depending upon what the river is here, but I'm not sure this is a winning play starting with the bet 3-bet on the flop. I understand that Charlie's saying like this guy's just not repping a strong hand, but this guy like over and over, he's just trying to tell Charlie, excuse me, sir, I have a strong hand. I'm not going to let you bluff me. I'm going to keep putting in money at every node. And Charlie just like, he won't listen to this guy screaming at him.
But I don't know if I have it in me to do anything again. Oh, of course. The river is the queen of hearts. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. He checks to us. He has about 850 behinds. And well, there's only really one option left. We've come this far.
Falling.
Fold. Fold.
Pass.
Yes, boys! Guess what you get?
All right, so we do get the dream spot here on the river. The river brings in a heart and this guy checks. And once he checks on the river, we're just not gonna run into a brick wall here. When he checks on this river, he's just gonna have jack X, right? And he's not gonna have strong jack X because a hand like ace jack would have probably just raised pre-flop. So this is just gonna be a weak jack a lot of the time. I think we got the best river to run it here. We've got an overbet behind. The scary draw completing card has come in. Really hard for Charlie to be bluffing here. So we get the dream run out. Charlie executes when he gets the dream run out and gets this guy to fold. I'm just wondering, like, what is the plan here on a offsuit 4? Overall, gonna give this hand a 2 out of 5. I think Charlie got a little bit lucky with the run out. I think his thoughts are good on the guy's range. I'm just not sure, even like knowing what this guy has, it seems like a little bit of fancy play syndrome. Like, sure, we know what he has, but that doesn't mean we just get to win the pot just because we know what he has. On a lot of runouts here on the river, we're just gonna be screwed.
We defend the big blind to pocket 6s, no spades. After it goes open button, small blind calls from 15, 45 in the pot, and the flop comes 5, 4, 3, 2 spades. We lead out for £10, and I've been doing a lot of this recently, leading very small in multi-way pots. It puts people in very difficult decisions and puts them in very difficult spots with a lot of their range. I would really recommend experimenting with this. Button makes the fold, the small blind makes the call, and instantly we pretty much know that we have the best hand.
All right, so this one, the button is going to open, the small blind calls, and we are going to come along in the big blind with 6s here. I actually think like I might consider a squeeze here. The button's going to be opening wide. The small blind when he calls is just extremely capped. Maybe the bottom of my squeezing range might be like 6s or 7s here. When I squeeze, I like to go good, better, best. Charlie chooses an interesting line on this flop. He decides to donk for just like 20% pot, and the button gets out of the way, and the small blind calls. So he just says he's been donking a lot on these boards, very, very small. And when he just gets called here, he knows he has the best hand. I don't actually mind this. Maybe consider actually going a little bit bigger. If the button does have a strong hand, like a set or a straight or two pair or something like that, on this board that's so wet and dynamic, he's going to put in the raise for us, even if we bet 25 or 30 or 35 here. And I think both players will call with weaker hands quite often. I guess the one benefit of going 10 is that if the button does have an overpair here, he may just raise a very small donk bet. So yeah, I think this is pretty creative. I can get behind it.
The turn is the king of hearts, and now knowing we have the best hand, we have to think what we want to try and get value from. There's a lot of pair and straight draws. There's a lot of ace highs. There's some flush draws. I decide to bet 50 into a pot of 65, and we get the fold.
We go to a turn, and like Charlie says, we've always got the best hand here. Like pocket sixes is the best hand, unless this guy just happens to have like a rare combo of king 8 of spades. So Charlie elects to go 50 here. I think this is kind of like an in-between size. When the king comes on the turn, hands like ace 4, ace 3, ace 5, this type of stuff shrivels up in value. And I'm not sure that a recreational player, when they see an overcard, a scary card come on the turn, if they're going to be continuing with that type of stuff to this size. I think a flush draw would be calling more than this. I think like a pair plus straight draw would be calling more than this. I think we maybe want to go smaller here. The size of a hand like ace 4, ace 5, ace 3 would call maybe something like 25 or 30. Or we just want to go really, really big here, targeting hands like 5, 7, 4x of spades, ace x of spades, those type of hands that are just going to call a much, much bigger bet here. So I think I lean towards either going 25 to 30 or maybe going something like 90 to 100. I think this middle size just doesn't accomplish all that much. Overall, we'll give this hand a 3 out of 5. Would maybe consider a squeeze pre-flop. Think the donk on the flop is interesting, something I would never consider, and I actually really, really like it. If I was going to nitpick here, I just really don't like the turn sizing. I think it's too in between. So overall, 3 out of 5 on this hand.
A live reg limps under the gun, and she and I have played quite a few pots together. I've gotten the better of her so far in a lot of them, and she hasn't seen many showdowns as well. So we've got quite a few bluffs through. She limps to 5, and on the +1, we look at pocket aces. We make it 20, she calls.
All right, so a reg, according to Charlie, is going to limp under the gun. We're gonna raise here to 20 with pocket aces. Unless there's some type of special circumstance, like the nip game is on, the squid game is on. I'm not even sure they were playing these games 3 years ago. A pro is not limping from under the gun, right? This is not, I would just consider this player like a trying wreck or a fish even. When someone limps from under the gun, it's going to be a very, very different range than if they limp from the cutoff or the button, right? When they limp from under the gun, are they planning on limp folding? No. I would just go much, much bigger with our pocket aces here. I just don't think this player is planning on limp folding anything they limp with from under the gun. I know Charlie's on board with like, we don't have to raise the same size and be balanced with different portions of our, like just go huge with aces here. Just go 35 or 40. They're just not gonna fold here pre-flop.
And the flop comes 8, 5, 3, rainbow. She checks, and we see bet 25. She calls. Turn is a deuce. So there's 100 in the pot, and even though we have 2 aces in our hands, I think that it's still worth targeting some of her ace high type hands. I think she has quite a few when she limp calls, and we have them just absolutely drawing dead. I ended up going for a 65 into a pot of 100s, and I think that this is still going to keep in all of her ace 7s if she limped ace 10, hands like this. And then there's also a lot of, 8x, 5x, 3x, a lot of other hands in there, pocket pairs, something like pocket 7s. She makes the call, and we're off to the river.
I'm on board with the c-bet size. Half pot seems good here. She is going to call. We go to a turn, which is a deuce. And again, I think this turn sizing is a little bit in between. Charlie talked about hands like ace 10 or something like that floating to the size. I just don't really see that. The board is rainbow. He ISO'd against an under the gun limp. Even with his image, I don't really think players are going to be floating here with a hand like ace 10. I think hands like 5x are going to call more because most likely a hand like 5x has something else going along with it. And if they have a hand like 6s or 7s or 9s or something like that, those hands are just never folding as well. And I think we can go a lot bigger on this turn and set up a more favorable SPR for jamming on the river and getting called. Like if we go 100, pot's going to be 300, going to have about 365 behind. I don't like these medium sizes because they don't do a good job really when villain's range is either going to be pretty inelastic or just going to be folding unless we go very, very small. And as Charlie described it, I think that range range is going to be pretty accurate. I would just either go very, very small here, 30, 35, or go very, very big here, 100, 125, something like that. I would lean more towards 100 to 125 with our specific hand.
The river is the offsuit 10. There is 230 in the pot, and she has about 400 behind. And I decide, based on my image, I can end up going for all of it here, thinking that she would perceive us to have a lot of just overcard bluffs, something like King Jack, for instance. We go all in, and we get the pretty short call and muck.
Charlie decides to go all in, deciding that with his image here, players are just going to call him light here. Like jamming the river, think this is good. But also, like, we got a pretty dream river card here. Like a hand like 8x or pocket 9s or 6s or 7s is not going to think this river card changes anything. The problem is if we get like a 4 or a 6 or an ace or a king, a lot of river cards that can kill our action. And I think the range that's going to give us value on the turn is going to be a lot more inelastic. So my quibble with this hand isn't the jam on the river. The jam on the river is obviously very, very good. The sizing pre-flop and the sizing on the turn, if we just choose bigger sizes there, I think when we don't get the dream run out, we just win more money a higher percentage of the time. Overall, we'll give this hand a 3 out of 5.
We open the cutoff with 7-6 of spades, and we get 3-bet by the professional poker player who's been 3-betting us a lot. And we finally have a hand we can play back against him. We can either 4-bet or we can call. We're deep enough that 4-bet's a definite possibility, but we decide to call. Flop comes king 3-3, 2 spades. Let's try and win this pot. As soon as I see this board, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to have to be aggressive in some way, because if I don't hit, I want to make sure that if he hasn't hit himself, we win this pot. So aggression's going to happen at some point. He c-bets 40 into a pot of 110, and we decide to check raise to 125.
So in this one, Charlie opens 7-6 of spades. We start off deeper here. He gets 3-bet on the button. The defend, I think, is good. When I'm out of position deep, I just like to 4-bet linear. I think players in position are going to tend to call too much, and especially if Charlie seems to take his image into account quite a bit. He's just a little bit on the wild, crazy side. So I like just calling here. We check it over, and we get what seems like a range c-bet, like 35-40% pot. And Charlie decides to raise, and against a fish here, I think raising can have some merit. If a player's just range betting and they're not really thinking anything besides like what their own hand is, I think we can just get a lot of folds here. Hands like 8s, 9s, 10s, ace jack of clubs or something like that. I think all this stuff just folds. But against a reg, it's just going to be really, really hard to rep value on this particular board. So I think what I like doing here quite a bit against a reg is just check calling on the flop. And if a reg does have a hand like ace king or pocket aces, they're just going to double barrel the turn, and we know they just have a very strong range, and we can just proceed with a check call on the turn. If a reg does check back the turn, what that means is they've just got a hand like ace high or pocket 9s or something like that, something with showdown value. And then what we can do, if the river is a blank, we can just come out and go 2x pot or 3x pot, knowing that they are capped. And it's going to be very, very hard for them to call with a hand like pocket 9s if the river is a blank, because they're just going to put us on a hand like king x. I think this is a more credible line than check raising the flop.
And the turn is a 9. Do we want to go for 3 streets and try and rep the old 3x? Do we want to get them to fold anything that isn't a king or better? Or do we want to get them to fold as floats? Do we want to rep a king ourselves? You know, there's a lot of different options that we can have here. By betting, we could either go big and represent a 3, or we could go small and represent something along the lines of king queen. So I decided to go for the small one. I thought that he still was going to have a decent amount of floats in his range, maybe something like pocket 8s, pocket 6s that decided to 3-bet as well. And I thought I could get them all to fold and then make a decision on the river, getting ourselves a cheap river to try and hit that juicy spade. He sadly makes the call.
So Charlie decides to go with a small bet on this turn, repping a king. I think this is okay. I'm just already a little confused because I wouldn't have gotten myself in this node. The problem with going small on the turn is I think all those hands that were non-believing on the flop, pocket jacks, pocket 10s, pocket queens, stuff like that, is going to continue here. I do think we're selling a little bit more of a credible story by going small, that we could have like king queen and king jack or king 10 suited or something like that. But I'm still just not sure a reg's going to give us credit. If we go big on this turn, I don't really think we're repping anything except a 3. I also think we're getting called light. I think maybe the play here is just to check. The reg here on the button is going to check behind with hands like 10s, jacks, queens, etc. And we just kind of get to realize for free here. This is kind of why I don't like check raising the flop, because we just put ourselves in a quandary here. So the reg is going to call, and we are going to a river.
And we have a 4 offsuit on the river. That's right. I decide to go for the Check. Yeah, it's not a good spot for me to bluff. And poker, it's a lot about knowing when to pull the trigger and when not to.
All right, so on this river, Charlie decides to go with the check, which I can get behind. I just don't think we're really getting any folds here. I mean, possibly could be a case for just going very, very small to get hands like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 5 of spades, that stuff to fold. But I just don't think it's a big enough portion of this reg's range here. Overall, would give this hand maybe a 2 out of 5. I really don't like check raising the flop because live regs in general are just going to have a couple like very, very common tendencies. They're just going to c-bet too much on the flop and they're just going to play more face up on turns. So I think we just get a lot more information. We get almost clairvoyance by just check calling here on the flop. And I know we're check calling on a paired board with a 7 high flush draw, but I think they're just going to play very, very face up like a standard 2-5 reg on the turn when we check call on this flop. So overall, don't really love the way he played this hand.
So first hand that we play, we're looking down in the big blind, the ace king offsuit hijack, who is a recreational player, and the cutoff, a very, very chatty professional poker player, or at least looks like a professional poker player, makes it 20. We go to 100 and the recreational player gets out of there and the cutoff reg makes the call. We look down at the flop of 10-6-3. It's an interesting kind of spot where our hand is actually the best hand quite often. I'm thinking if I go small flop, check call the turn to keep in his floats and his bluffs, and then check decide river, we are in the driver's seat where he gets to either bluff or not bluff. So the size that I go on the flop is very, very small. We decide to go for a 35-pound bet into a pot of what's already like 207. He makes the call.
All right, so we have a limp here and a loose reg ISOs, and we are going to 3-bet ace king, like the sizing, on board with everything so far, gonna get called by the reg. And Charlie decides to c-bet very, very small on this flop. And I wanna walk through a couple permutations. One of the games I like to play is what happens if. And Charlie's thinking here is sound, right? If he c-bets very, very small, this loose reg is going to float very, very wide. And then when Charlie checks on the turn, this guy's gonna get to the turn with a very wide range, and this guy's just going to stab quite a bit, and Charlie can check call the turn, and then kind of check evaluate on the river and pick off quite a few bluffs. I think this is pretty good thinking, but I always like to think when we look for a good move, can there be a better one? And in this place, I think there can be. So I actually like to check here on the flop because villains tend to just monkey stab when we check to them. So let's think about the two permutations we can kind of drive down here. When we check on the flop, they are going to massively overstab. They're also going to choose a larger size in this $35. We just get to check call here. But what happens after we check call on the flop and check on the turn? Even regs are going to start under double barreling on the turn. They stab the flop very, very wide, get to the turn with a wide range, and then they just tend to kind of shut it down after we check call one time. So players kind of play honestly. Now let's think about what happens if we c-bet small like Charlie. Well, if we c-bet small, yes, they call too wide, but then when we check on the turn, what happens when we check, when we show passivity in general, they're going to get to the turn too wide, and then players are going to start monkey stabbing. And the problem is, yes, they're going to monkey stab on the turn just like they would monkey stab on the flop. And you may be thinking, well, Mark, isn't this better? We've now gotten 2 streets of value against their air. The problem is we have no idea what their range is now when they monkey stab on the turn. Because this board is so dry and because they're in position and stacks are so shallow, they may flat here with a hand like pocket 10s, pocket 6s, pocket 3s, the strong portion of their range. So when it goes bet call on the flop and then we check on the turn, they're still going to arrive on the turn with a bunch of the strong parts of their range. And then also they're just going to be stabbing all of the time when they get to the turn with all of their floats, their ace highs, their king highs with backdoors, all that stuff that doesn't make a hand on the turn. So we're just going to kind of be in no man's land where we're just not really going to know what to do.
The turn is a 4 and we're sticking with our plan. We give him the check and he makes a pretty small bet himself. So the pot's like 275. He makes a bet of 85. Now that's pretty damn small. It's about a third pot. I don't know if he's repping that he's got some kind of one pair hand. We're sticking with the plan. We check call. The river is a 4. He's looking at us. He's looking at his chips. He picks up some chips and hits the check. We table our ace king. He says ace king is good.
So we face a small stab on the turn after betting on the flop and checking on the turn. And then the river goes check, check, and we win. So overall, I think Charlie's plan here pretty good, but hopefully I elucidated my reasons clearly for why I think checking is slightly better than c-betting small here with ace king. Overall, we'll give this hand maybe a 4 out of 5.
We open 8-7 suited under the gun to 15 pounds. £10. The only player to call is the big blind, and he's a recreational player. So the flop is 9-8 deuce. You know, you can have just random like king threes, things like that. You can have a bunch of maybe like overcards, king queens, king jacks. When he connects with the board, he can have something like 9x, 8x, deuce x, and straight draws. There's no flush draws on board. Based on that range, I decided to go for the idea of trying to get value on the flop from his straight draws and maybe some pocket sixes or something like that. Check back turn on most low turns and then call most rivers, but it really does depend. We're c-betting £10 into, what is that, £32? So just about third pot size. He calls. Turn is a queen. It's really not the kind of card we want to see. Always going to be checking back on here. There's not really too much value to turning our hands into a bluff. Like we could try and fold out a 9, although he'd probably call most of his 9x on the turn, but he can also just have a queen. So it's really, really hard for him to have a worse hand than us, and definitely very hard for us to get value. So checking is the only thing that makes any sense here. The river is a deuce. He bets 25 into a pot of 52. We throw in the call and he tables king 10 suited with a backdoor flush draw on the flop.
So really like the way Charlie played this one. Spoiler alert. We get called here in the big blind. We c-bet small on the flop. Maybe if I'm gonna have a minor quibble, maybe you could just go slightly bigger. I don't think ace highs are folding here from a fish in the big blind. I don't even think hands like pocket fours or pocket fives, if we go 15 or 20 here, even on the flop, are folding. So maybe you could just go slightly bigger. We're gonna get called. We check back on the turn, and now the villain comes out and bets just under half pot on the river. And Charlie says this is normally a fold, but he had some live reads here. Look, I'm not a huge live read guy. I'm more of a population, a tendency read guy. And I would just say in this spot, they call too wide pre-flop, which means when the turn goes check, check, they get to the river with a range that is way too wide and way too weak. And then when they bet half pot, this is the size they choose with the wide and weak part of the range, because the strong part of the range that gets to the river, maybe hands like queen X or two pair, stuff like this, would just choose a bigger size here on the river, trying to get greedy because the pot is so small because the turn went check, check. The most profitable line in all of poker that I talk about all the time. C-bet small on the flop, check back the turn with showdown value, bluff catch on the river. This is the bread and butter, one of the bread and butter lines of winning at live poker. Really like the way Charlie played it. Like the way he played this hand. Would give this a 5 out of 5.
And now we get king queen off on the button. A recreational limps the hijack. I want to go a size that he's going to be calling his queen 10 offs, his queen 9 offs, you know, his queen 6 suited, hands like that. So it ends up going 20. Now the big blind, who looks like an online reg, he makes it 90, and the recreational player folds. The action is on us. I decided to go for the call.
So let's talk about pre-flop. Charlie opens on the button over a limp here in ISO raise, and now the reg in the big blind is going to 3-bet to 90, and Charlie decides to continue with a call here. I think he should maybe give a little bit more credence to going with the 4-bet here. I really like to go with a polarized 4-bet range, just because we're incentivized to call so much when we're in position. So what is a polarized 4-bet range? This just means the very top of our range, our aces, kings, our ace king suited, and then the worst hands that may continue to a call. And king queen off at this depth may be the worst offsuit hand we would continue to a call. And I think if it's a reg in the big blind and they can be rather wide here, going with the 4-bet is pretty good. It's going to look very strong, especially when we are in position. We can generate quite a lot of fold equity in this spot, especially if it is an online reg like Charlie said, who's going to be 3-betting at an appropriate frequency.
Queen jack 5, 3 clubs. We do not have a club in our hand, so it's not the best. The big blind bets 30, and this actually solidifies our read that he's an online player. This is a very GTO-esque size. That doesn't mean he's going to be a phenomenal GTO player, but we call. There's no decision. We don't want to be raising. He can still have aces, he can have ace queen, he can have a bunch of hands that are better than us, he can also have a bunch of hands that are worse that might bluff. So the turn comes out and it's given us trips. We have 3 queens. Now our hand has improved dramatically. If he has aces, we beat him. It's fewer combinations of ace queen. If he has kings, we now beat him. And if he has something like ace jack, he's drawing dead. So this is an absolute dream card, and he checks it over to us, meaning it's slightly less likely he has a flush. I think a lot of his smaller flushes would continue betting himself. So I want to go a size that I think ace jack still has a decent chance of calling, and all of the rest of the stuff is definitely going to call. So I go for a half pot bet, also keeping our range pretty wide. He makes the call, and the river is, it's a f***ing 10 of clubs. So He checks to us. Do we consider bluffing? Now that is a question, you know? Could we? Obviously, if you even thought that, get out of here. He just has the ace of clubs loads. We check back, expecting to lose a huge percentage of the time. Hopefully win versus something like red aces. Flips over. Queen nine of spades. Let's go, boys!
All right, let's talk about post flop. This guy goes small on the flop. Think calling here, pretty standard. Would not be considering raising on this particular board with this particular hand. Turn, Charlie decides to go for 120 here. I think at this stack depth, this is actually a pretty good size, and make sure we get called by hands like kings or aces. No club here. I think if we were deeper, I'd probably go bigger, but at this stack depth, I like this size quite a bit. We go to the river, which is maybe the worst card in the deck, and it goes check, check, and Charlie wins against queen nine suited. Overall, would just maybe consider that 4-bet pre. Like the way Charlie played it post, would give a 4 out of 5 rating on this hand.
We had king 8 suited on the hijack. We open button 3-bets, the reg that we had the king queen against, and I decided to go for a 4-bet with this exact combination just for fun, just because I felt like he was going to be over 3-betting me because I was a recreational in the big blinds. He shoves and we fold.
All right, so just want to talk about this real quickly because I mean, it's a very simple pre-flop hand, but I think it's important. So Charlie opens the king 8, gets 3-bet by a reg on the button, and decides to go for the 4-bet here. I really don't like this. This is incongruent. Charlie has mentioned multiple times that when he 4-bets, particularly from out of position, they're just calling too much. They're just 5-bet shoving too much because they just don't believe him. And if they're not going to believe him, choosing this hand to 4-bet, not going to be a good choice. If Charlie's right about his image that players just think he's full of shit, let's just 4-bet thinly for value. Let's just choose the pocket 10s, pocket jacks, the ace queen suited. Let's 4-bet those hands if players are going to be non-believers. Let's not choose kind of these 4-bet airball king x blocker bluff. This is not going to be a good 4-bet. We have to be more congruent with our thinking. And of course, we get jammed on here and just have to fold. I'm going to give this hand a 1 out of 5. Charlie said he was tilted. He's better than that, right? He's better than this. I think he let his frustration get to him. This is not a good 4-bet.
Open from a chatty reg that we had the ace king against early on. A recreational player calls the cutoff. We have 9s on the button. Don't know whether to squeeze, don't know whether to call. I was a little bit tilted, and I'm always leaning towards the more aggressive action when I'm tilted. And I ended up squeezing. The small blind 4-bets, so we made it 60. The small blind 4-bets us to 180, and we're about £1,000 deep. We make the call.
All right, once again, I don't know what's going on here, but I like the squeeze here with pocket 9s. I think this is good. Once we have an open and we've got dead money with the fish call, I think just squeezing gonna be very, very good. I'd be going very, very linear here. Now, some people may get confused and say, Mark, don't you do a lot of calling when a reg opens? Yes, that's true. When a reg opens and there's fish behind, but once a reg opens and a fish calls, I'm just going linear, right? I'm going good, better, best. I think this is a very good squeeze from Charlie here. Now the small blind is going to put in the cold 4-bet and back around to us. Players in live poker are under cold 4-betting. Even if it's a reg, they're just not finding enough of the cold 4-bets with the ace queen suited, the ace jack suited, the king queen suited, the pocket 10s. This stuff just doesn't get cold 4-bet enough, which it should be at a high frequency in this configuration. So I think just folding pre is the move here.
He c-bets tiny, like 15 to 20% on ace 8-5, 2 diamonds. We have the 9 of diamonds. I justify making another call.
Now we go to a flop. This guy c-bets small. The thing is, what hands do guys choose as the bluffs, the worst hands in their range when they're cold 4-betting? Ace queen suited, ace queen off, stuff like that. Now the board is ace high. What are we really beating? We lose to everything except king queen suited, and I would argue at live 2-5, guys just aren't cold 4-betting the king queen suited. We just need to be folding on this flop. Like, we should have folded pre-flop. Definitely when the flop comes ace high, we just need to be folding right here, right now.
Turns 7, giving us a gut shot. He bets again, and we just fold. It's just like these kind of situations where if I were playing normally, I would have just flat pre. I probably might have folded to the 4-bet. I would have definitely folded to the flop. My energy was bad, and I realized that I was just playing pretty badly.
Now the double barrel on the turn. Charlie finds the fold. Overall, again, I think this hand is a bit of a punt, and Charlie kind of walks on that line like I do quite a bit. And when it works out, it looks great. When it doesn't work, it kind of blows up in our faces and makes us look like big dummies. But Charlie admitted he was a little bit on tilt, a little bit frustrated, and I kind of have a 3-strike rule for myself. If I make an egregious call or fold, just kind of a bad play play because I feel that frustration, I give myself a 5-minute break. I got to stand up. I got to walk away from the table, take 5 minutes. If it happens one time, that's strike number 1. If it happens time 2, this is strike number 2 for Charlie. I get up, I take a 30-minute break, right? I go outside, I smoke a joint, whatever. And then if it happens 3 times, that's strike 3, rack up my chips, going home. No other options than that. If I feel the frustration getting to me 3 times, we're going home, we're done with the day. For Charlie, this is strike 2. I just don't think this hand is good. I empathize with the tilt, the frustration creeping up here. But again, I would give this hand a 1 out of 5.
With 450 pounds effective, the low jack, who's a recreational player, limps. The cutoff, he also limps. We're in the small blind and we look down at king jack offsuit. We make it 12 from the small blind and we get 2 calls. So the pot is gonna be 38 pounds. Queen, 10, deuce, 2 diamonds, and we do not have a diamond in our hands. I don't think I can fold somebody off king queen. I don't think I can fold somebody off top pair in general. If I had a value hand here, I'd bet big. If I had a bluff here, I'd bet small. So I bet 18 into a pot of what is going to be 38.
All right, so we get a couple of limps here and Charlie decides to ISO from the small blind with king jack. I'm not really sure what this ISO accomplishes when we go $12, like 6x here, right? Because we're just going to be called a lot. So I think like we're just never generating fold equity here, right? When we go 6x and we have a hand that's just not that good, we're going to be out of position. The fish is just never folding when he limps from the hijack here to a 6x size. And that's just going to bring the reg in. So we're going to be playing out of position 3 ways here with kind of a garbage hand. 2 slightly better options here are either just completing, not bloating this pot from out of position with a marginal hand, or just going very, very big, knowing we're against 2 very capped ranges and just taking down the dead money. I wouldn't mind just going like 25 here or something egregious because we're just going to take it down quite a bit. We just get to take down $6 for free here, which is really nice at 1-2. Just like we thought, we're going to get a couple calls here. We go to a flop, which is queen 10 deuce. Charlie decides to go small. And once again, I want to talk about the merits of checking here, particularly on these wet dynamic boards. One of 3 things happens. Number 1, they bet big. If they bet big, they have a strong hand. We can check call with our draw and see a turn. Number 2, they bet small. If they bet small, they mostly don't have enough strong hands. They like to protect their hand. So if they bet small, we can go for the check raise, and the check raise actually maximizes fold equity rather than just coming out and betting 40% pot ourselves, which are just always going to call with a 10 or some type of draw here or something like that. Where if we go for the check raise, we can generate a ton of fold equity. The third thing that can happen if we check, they check. That's really good. We get to realize for free if they check on this particular board. That just means they never have top of range. When the board is wet and dynamic and they check back in position after the pre-flop raiser checks to them, they don't have a queen, they don't have 2 pair, they don't have a set, which gives us carte blanche if we don't hit our hand on the turn to just empty the clip. This is why I like checking so much, especially to weaker players. He can play perfect because they just tell us exactly what the range is. They hold their cards up and put them on their head and say, Charlie, here are my 2 cards, and then we could just do exactly what our hand wants to do.
Hijack, recreational player folds, and the cutoff reg calls. Now the turn is offsuit 6. He can have queen X, he can have 10X, he can have the odds maybe very sticky, something like pocket 8s, probably not. He can have ace jack, he can have king jack, and he can have jack 9 suited, and he can have flush draws. So can we put most of that in a really, really dicey spot with a big size, or do we want to just target a little part of that and go a smaller size, or do we want to check and give up and think that he's probably going to be a bit too sticky with our image? Decide to go 90 pounds. 90 pounds. It's a huge size on this board, and if he's playing 1-2 whilst there's a 2-5 table going on, it probably matters to him a significant amount, so I thought I'd bump it up. Now we get a tank. Fold, boys. Let's vote. We got the fold.
All right, so on this turn, Charlie decides to go with the overbet size. I think this is okay. I'm not sure it's completely congruent with his thoughts on the flop because he said he just didn't think he's ever getting a hand like queen X to fold on this board. The problem with going with this size, if we do get called here, the reg's just going to have a range that's very queen X heavy, and then maybe some flush draws or pair plus flush draws, stuff like that. So if we do get called here, not going to be a very good spot to bluff on the river because we've narrowed his range down to queen X and strong draws. So I guess, I don't know if Charlie's plan was to give up on the river or just go very, very small to fold out some of those draws. I think an alternate option here could just be choosing the size that 10X or even some of those weaker draws could continue with on this turn. I would love for hands like 10X to call. If we go small here, if we go 30, 35, 40 bucks here, we just keep in that weak stuff and then we have a much more profitable bluff on the river. The problem is if we go really big, the 10X folds and we just don't really have a profitable bluff on the river. So Not really sure what Charlie's plan was, but I think if the plan is to give up or go small on the river, this overbet size is just fine. I just slightly prefer going smaller. But again, this goes back to the flop. This is why I think checking is so good, because then their range is just face up. We don't get in these difficult positions on turns and rivers because they tell us what the range is on the flop. So overall, because I don't like the pre-flop size, because I prefer a check on the flop, and because I'm not completely on board with the overbet on the turn, we'll give this hand a 2 out of 5.
So a recreational player opens the low jack, and we are on the hijack with pocket tens. He opens to 15. We're sitting on around, I think, 500 pounds at this point. So we flat tens on the hijack, and the chatty, a loose reg from last time, he makes it 60 on the button. The recreational player folds, and it's on us. I really felt like it was a good spot to just flat and outplay and post flop if I get the chance, and probably get away from our hand if he happens to have a better hand. So we decide to call.
And again, I'm starting to question a little bit of the congruence here. Last session, when he had pocket nines, he went for the squeeze, and now we have a fish open, but he's not going to 3-bet tens because he just doesn't have a ton of bankroll. I get it, because he wants to play a little bit more conservative because he doesn't have a lot of bankroll built up, and this is a bankroll challenge. But if he's going to squeeze the nines and call with the tens, it's not really congruent, especially when a fish opens and we've got a reg behind on the button. What's going to happen a lot is we're going to be playing a pot where we're monkey in the middle here. Whenever a fish opens, I just like to 3-bet wide. We just get to isolate the fish and play a pot heads up in position, which is going to be one of the most profitable spots in all of poker. We shut out the people behind us. We get the ultimate position. Fish just aren't going to 4-bet enough. They're not going to blow us off our equity with a bunch of bluffs. So like, we just get to realize, we get to over realize. Strongly prefer the 3-bet with tens here. Reg's going to go with the squeeze on the button. Going to be really tough to fold tens at this point. So we are in there and we're going to a flop.
And the flop comes 8-7-6 rainbow. There's going to be around 142 pounds in the pot. Are we going to check call? Are we going to check raise? Are we going to lead? That's all right, boys, we're gonna lead. If he's sitting on like ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, king, queen, king, jack, he's probably just gonna check back and gonna take his 6 free outs against our hand. So I really don't wanna let him just get that turn card for free. But also at the same time, if he does happen to have an overpair and I've misread it somehow, because these live reads aren't 100% accurate, I don't wanna be losing too much and just fucking bomb it. So we lead 25 pounds. We get the tank fold.
So Charlie, once again, finding a real creative play that I may not find here on this flop. He just goes for the very small donk bet here, going to put this guy in a little bit of a pickle. This board obviously going to be really good for Charlie, who flatted the under the gun open. The loose reg on the button should be squeezing linear here if he knows what's going on. So he's just going to have a lot of overpairs, big overcards, Broadway cards here. Going to be in a really tough spot. I like this donk a lot on the flop. My issue with the hand is not going for the 3-bet pre. We need to be more consistent, right? Let's not let the mental game get to us and start making suboptimal decisions. I give this one a 3 out of 5. Don't like pre-flop, but I think the donk on the flop on this board is really creative, really nice. Definitely a spot that I wouldn't have found myself. So Charlie, really creative how he played this post flop. 3 out of 5.
Player of the day makes it 80 pounds. Now he's been doing this with so much stuff. In fact, there was a hand that he played before. He did that with queen 10 offsuit versus an under the gun open, and then called a big 4-bet and somehow like backdoored his way into a straight. And we're looking down at ace queen offsuit in the small blind. We make it 210 pounds. This is a big one. He ends up making the call. We're heads up to the flop. Now there's about a pot-sized bet left. Jack 5-5, 2 hearts. We do not have a heart in our hands. I think there's only one option, boys. I think the best thing for us to do here is just jam. Thought there's a chance he had something like pocket 10s, pocket 9s. I got him speaking pre-flop, and I asked him if you got a good hand, and he said, yeah. There was a level of authenticity that I felt from him when he said this. Thought we could get him to fold ace king if that's a thing. Probably like 80% of the time, 70% of the time. And I felt like if I bet small, all of those hands would still go in. And if he does happen to have a jack or pocket jacks or something like that, which I didn't think he had by getting live reads on the flop, then so be it. There's a huge amount in the middle. We just got to jam it in and take our equity. He tank calls us. He turns over pocket 10s. And the turn is... it's a f***ing...
All right, so in this hand, a loose reg is going to open, and a whale in the cutoff is going to 3-bet. Charlie goes for the cold 4-bet here, which I like. I am very much on board with this. He said this guy's going to be too wide. He's aggressive. Okay. This guy's going to call. We go to a flop, Jack 5-5, and Charlie decides just to stick this in. And again, I would challenge Charlie in this spot. If this guy's going to be super aggressive, right? He's going to be the guy who's just 3-betting like way out of line. When this guy just calls pre-flop, can we eliminate maybe some of the ace king from this guy in the cutoff range? Might some of the ace king just stick it in? A lot of times recreational players just don't want to have to make a decision post flop in a big pot. Their fear is fear of having to make a big decision. So when we start off just not all that deep, relatively shallow, less than 100 big blinds effective, I just think ace king sometimes jams. If he's jamming ace king at least some of the time pre-flop, what does he have? 9s, 10s? What are we really getting to fold here? I know I have the benefit of being able to see the cards, right? I've seen this hand. I'm trying not to be biased, but I just think like if this guy doesn't have all of the ace king, I think jamming here maybe a little bit of a torch. So I may just check give up. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I may just check give up on this board. Charlie jams, this guy calls. You know what, I like the 4-bet pre. I'm not gonna ding Charlie too hard for jamming on the flop. I feel like my bias of seeing the cards may just be coming into effect a little bit too much here, but I don't know. Let's give this one a 4 out of 5.
Kevin opens the button. We're on the small blind. We're sitting on around probably 550 pounds at this point, and we have pocket 4s. There's a recreational player in the big blind. We're getting in there with the call. We are heads up to the flop of Jack 9-8.
I want to talk about pre-flop. A reg opens on the button. Charlie decides to flat in the small blind with a fish behind, and we're going heads up to a flop. I want to talk about this spot. And you guys know I'm a big fan of flatting a lot of hands when a reg opens when there's fish behind. But this spot is different because we're going to be in the small blind, and even if the fish comes in, now we are monkey in the middle here, right? We're wedged in between. We're going to be first to act after the reg c-bets. What I mean by that is if the fish calls in the big blind, both Charlie and the fish, we're going to naturally check over to the reg on the button. And if the reg c-bets, we are now next to act. We have to act first before the fish behind us acts, which means we are going to be massively under realizing in the spot. I just want to play 3-bet or fold, maybe with pocket 4s, just going into the muck. If we think this guy's opening too wide on the button, could get behind a 3-bet here as well. Just 3-bet and get him to fold like king 9 offsuit or whatever kind of trash he's opening on the button. That I could get behind that as well. I don't like the flat from the small blind, even with a fish behind.
So this is definitely not a spot we want to be leading. Our hand is absolute trash. We want to be giving up and potentially checking down versus something like ace-high, potentially. But he decides to check behind. So we have a turn, and the turn is an offsuit 8. We have a good inkling that he has not seen much of this flop. And given that our hand is ahead of some of his other hands like ace queen, ace 10, ace king, and they all have so many outs against us, I did want to get a little bit of protection and also to allow us to bluff if we wanted to bluff. Decided to bet 15 into a pot of 35. He makes the call, and the river is the offsuit 9. This is one of the cards that I wanted to be bluffing on. We make it 125 pounds to go, and we get the very quick fold from what I believe was ace high.
Charlie goes small here on the turn to keep in the ace highs, stuff like that. I really like it. And then on the river, goes for the overbet here and gets the fold. So obviously Charlie he's floating and weaving. He's making the right moves post flop, but I would just argue that folding or 3-betting pre is going to have a higher overall EV long term than flatting out a small blind with 4s. So really like how he played it post flop. Really don't like the flat pre-flop. I would give this one a 3 out of 5. Just got to ding him for pre-flop, even though I thought he played post flop nearly perfect.
Reg opens to 20. We've got a call from Raph, recreational player who's pretty good at poker, actually calls the button. We're in the big blind with ace 10 off. We bump it up. Ace 10 off's too good against these very loose ranges. The absolute dream happens. We get the dream swap. We get a fold from the Channy man. We get a call from Raph himself, and we get a fold from the button, and the flop is the dream. Queen, queen, 3 rainbow. God damn it. We're actually still ahead of a decent amount of his range because he has such a wide range. So there's around 280 in the pot. I definitely want to be c-betting here. So some people are trying to take their ace highs to showdown. In so many spots, I think they're just absolutely punting away. As soon as you start trying to take your ace high to showdown, in most spots, people just know you have ace high. So we bet 75, he calls, and we're off to a deuce turn. We check, and surprisingly, he actually checks back here. Now, I didn't know what to make of it. I thought that it was very likely he had some kind of ace high hand, maybe like ace 5, ace 6, ace 7, and the river is the ace from space. Beautiful to see. Now, there's a decision here for sure. I snap checked the river. As soon as I saw it, I snap checked to give him the impression that we didn't like the ace. I was so confident he was going to bet an ace himself, but he decides to check back the old king 3.
We got ace 10 here. Charlie decides to squeeze with all the dead money. I think this is perfectly fine at the stack depth. I am on board. We get called by just the whale here in the hijack. We go to a flop. I want to push back against Charlie's notion here that if you check, they just get to bet and push you off all your ace high. Well, just because we check and they bet doesn't mean we have to fold, right? We can just check call here. So we're either going to have to face the monkey stab on the flop or on the turn. I'd prefer to face the monkey stab on the flop because then we get clairvoyance about what their range is by the turn. Instead, if we c-bet on the flop and then check the turn, they monkey stab the turn, and then we don't really know what their range is until the river. The way Charlie plays it here, he goes for a small c-bet. He gets called and he checks on the turn. He goes to a river and he checks here on the river again. This guy ends up checking it back. I think I'm on board with checking here. I like Charlie's reasoning for checking, just figuring if this guy had a hand like pocket sevens or pocket eights or whatever, he would just always bet the turn after Charlie checks to him. I think a lot of the times when we check call the flop, they put us on a hand like ace kings. I'd be worried this guy may check back a hand like ace seven suited, but if Charlie's got the read that this guy's just always betting ace seven, obviously checking on this river is good. If we're a little bit less confident in that, I may just put the money in on this river because I don't think an ace is ever folding, but I'm just not sure that an ace is always betting. But Charlie's got the read here. He's a live read guy, so I'm going to trust him. I'm going to go with his gut here in this spot. Overall, would give this hand a 4 out of 5. I think I really like checking on the flop for the reasons I kind of illustrated, but I think overall Charlie played it pretty well.
We open 20 pounds from the hijack with ace 3 off. There are a lot of recreational players ahead of me, and Raf, our main man, was in the big blinds, so I thought it was a really good chance that if we go 20 here, then we're going to get heads up. Raf calls in the big blinds.
This is just too wide. This is just too wide at the stack depth, opening ace 3. I know we've got a whale in the big blind. We want to be opening wider. We want to be playing pots with this guy, but like best case scenario happens here. We get the fold from the cutoff, the button in the small blind, and we get it heads up, but like we're still 100 big blinds, and even though we're in position, even though we have a massive skill edge, like it's not like we're 300, 400 big blinds where we can really impose that skill edge all that much. Like I'm fine opening this on the button. Everything just has to go perfectly according to plan for this to be profitable, and I think all too often, like what happens in live poker is people just call too much pre-flop. The cutoff calls, the button calls. We're playing out of position now 3 or 4 ways with kind of a trash offsuit ace where people just don't fold, like ace 9 offsuit.
Flop comes 10-5-5 rainbow. I decide to go for the c-bet for a few reasons, which will come clear in the rest of the hand. He calls. We have a pretty good live read. He doesn't have a 10 or a 5. Turn comes the jack, checking behind. The river is a queen. He decides to bet 50 pounds. We have ace high. We don't have a very good hand. We can either fold or we can either raise. Or we can look Raf damn straight in the eyes and say, I don't think you got it, son. Old school poker. Boom. We call, we put the 50 pounds in. That's right, ace high hero call. We tell him, I don't even got 2 pair. I'm gonna call anyway. And he shows me, he flop quads. He flop quads. That's probably why he looked nervous. He did flop quads. I'm kidding, he had king 8 offsuit, boys. He had king high. We got the read right. We got him, boys.
Really like the small c-bet here, going half pot, 60% pot, whatever. I think they just float way too wide, so I'm on board with this. On the turn, going with the check back. Very good. You guys know I'm a big fan. C-betting range on the flop, checking back on the turn when we've got showdown value. We go to the river, and this guy comes out and bets half pot. We've talked about it before. When we open pre-flop, they call too wide. When we c-bet the flop, they raise too much of their strong stuff, and they call too wide. When the turn goes check, they get to the river with a range that's way too wide, and then they come out, and then what do they do on the river with that wide weak range? They just come out and bet half pot because they don't know what else to do. Calling here, so good. I love the call with ace high. I think he played it perfect post flop. I just think it's way too wide, especially when we're 100 big blinds effective. Opening this from the hijack, I think it's not going to be a winning play, even if you are as good as Charlie is at navigating post flop spots. So overall, we give this one a 3 out of 5.
Tight player opens +1, 8-handed. So there's 6 people behind him. He opens. We are in the hijack with ace queen off. He's open to 15. We 3-bet to 50 pounds, and lo and behold, the button cold calls. Rafa is in the big blinds. He makes it 190. So we haven't actually seen him 4-bet yet. We've seen him do so many crazy stuff that I just assumed 4-bet was part of his play. So Raf makes it 190 to go. I'm all in. I'm all in. the button gets out of the way, and it's on Raf.
Want to talk about this one pre-flop, and we go with a 3-bet from the under the gun open. Even against a nit, I think this is okay. We get cold called, and now we get the whale who put in the cold 4-bet. And I just want to point out, I heard Charlie say a couple of things here. Number one, he said this guy was cold calling a lot. And number two, he said he hadn't seen this guy 4-bet before, but he was pretty crazy. If a guy's cold calling 3-bets a lot, that means his cold 4-bet range is just going to probably be too strong. Maybe a little bit optimistic again. He does go with the jam. I would probably just fold this one. We see the results, and he does run into this guy's bottom of range here, like ace queen. I guess if the guy can have ace queen off here, maybe he can have jacks and tens and maybe ace jack suited or something like that. But I just think it's a little bit optimistic. When players cold 4-bet, especially when they have a cold call range to 3-bet, it's just going to be too strong. And I just prefer to fold this hand. This one ends up working out. He gets the guy to fold the exact same hand. I gotta give Charlie credit for having the balls to jam this one, especially with the low bankroll, but I'm gonna give this one a 2 out of 5 because I think just all too often we just run into kings and aces here.
As Raf opens under the gun. Now, this is the second time in a row that we're going to 3-bet him as we look down at ace king in this exact configuration of seats. He opens under the gun to 25. We are on the hijack. We make it 125. He calls flop of jack 6-4, 2 clubs. We c-bet 75. He calls. It's the dream. We finally got a pair. No more hero calling for us to do. We fire 200, leaving 400 behind, and he goes all in. As he went all in, this was my thought process. Oh God, I haven't seen him bluff this kind of spot ever. This is definitely not a bluff. I call. He's got an ace and a fucking queen, boys. We got him. Bricks out. Let's go, boys. This is a huge pot.
All right, so ace king here. He's gonna 3-bet really, really big here, which I like if this guy's just calling way, way, way too wide. We're gonna go to a flop. Charlie c-bet small. I'm on board. This is great so far. We go to a turn, which is an ace, and now this guy checks it over. SPR of about 1.5 here, and Charlie decides to go 200. I don't love this half pot size, and the reason why I don't love it, if he's got a draw, if he's got an ace, he's never folding. He's calling 600. But if he does have a hand like pocket 8s or pocket 9s, or even a hand like jack 10 suited, that stuff on this turn now shrivels up in value. What hand do recreational players put you on in a 3-bet pot? Ace king. 2 sizes I would like on a turn like this. A very small size, maybe just slightly smaller than that, maybe 100, 125, making sure that jack X, the pocket 9s, pocket 8s, 6X, all of these hands continue, or we just put all the money in and target the ace X portion, the flush draw portion, and throw the jack X and the under pairs out the window. I think either of those are viable options. Obviously, we end up getting the jam here, and he has ace queen. My quibble with this turn is the sizing just a little bit too in between. If he does have a hand like ace 5, we're probably not getting the jam on the turn, but also too big of a size to get value from, say, pocket 9s. I would give this hand a 3 out of 5.
We open queens from the hijack. A recreational calls the cutoff. A small blind professional squeezes out the small blinds for 110. Raf himself cold calls. Everybody's at least like 1.4K apart from the recreational. We make it 355 to go. It's a great size. Anything that will just keep Raf in with whatever he's got, but also is big enough that we don't want to give everybody a good price. We don't want to take queens 3 away. That's insane. 2 folds. The legend Raf himself gives us some action. Off to a flop. We see 4, 6, queen. We see a queen. So it's queen 6-4, 2 diamonds. We do not have a diamond. We go for the small c-bet. We do not want him to fold a single hand. We have everything basically drawing dead apart from straight draws and flush draws. We bet 100 pounds. 100 to go, sir. He's like, that's a very fair and reasonable price, as you were. Turn the jack of diamonds. So I really think that we still have the best hand a huge amount of the time, but obviously a lot of his hands can now have equity. If he has something like ace 10 with a diamond, I go for the 355 on the turn. He gives me a reasonably quick call. The river is the offsuit for, oh my God. And we go for the tank. I'm all in. And we eventually end up getting the tank call. We end up getting the tank call, boys. Let's go.
So pocket queens, we open, we get a call, we get a squeeze from a reg in the small blind, and now the whale's going to cold call. Remember, this is why I didn't really like 4-betting ace queen. If this guy's just cold calling 3-bets, means his 4-bet range is strong, right? We're gonna put in the obvious 4-bet here with all of that dead money. Reg's gonna get out of the way. Whale is going to call. Look at that sweet baby there. Charlie decides to go for a really small bet here, 100. I get the point. point. We don't want this guy to fold anything. This type of guy who cold calls a 3-bet and then calls the 4-bet, is he going to be the type here to fold anything anyway, right? If he's got pocket 7s, if he's got pocket 5s, what type of hands would even consider folding on this board? Maybe the biggest size that a hand like ace jack or ace 10 would call. And I think they're going to call a bigger size than this. Certainly pocket 8s, pocket 9s. They're calling 200, right? This guy just doesn't like to fold. So we can go a little bit bigger, get a little bit more value here. I understand why he went so small. I think we can go a little bit bigger and get the same range to continue. We go to a turn. Charlie goes small on this turn, making sure that hands like pocket 9s with a diamond or something like that stick around. Really, really like the size here from Charlie. No critiques, no complaints. This is great. We go to a river and the SPR being 0.5. Charlie sticks the money in. This guy calls and we end up winning a nice big boy pot. Gonna give this one a 4 out of 5. My one quibble here, I think we go a little bit bigger on the flop. All right, so the question you've all been asking, how good is Charlie actually? You know, I have the benefit, the hindsight of doing this from behind my screen, sitting at my desk at home. Obviously, you're going to make better decisions. You're going to have more clairvoyance, especially I have the bias of being able to see the cards. I know I disagreed with him in a lot of spots, but this guy is a top tier poker player. S tier, yes, probably. Charlie is very, very good. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it turns you into the biggest boy possible. Thank you and have a gentle